Hello, everybody. Happy Monday. Let me know if you can hear me. If you can hear me, say, I hear you. I hear you, Joe. You sound amazing. At least I hope that's what you're going to say. Oh, thank goodness. I'm having so much computer troubles. All these updates. My computer broke and I had to get a new computer and I'm updating and syncing and finding passwords. Anybody else get really excited to get a new computer and then, like, the first day of having that computer, you want to, like, throw it against the wall? Then you go to some techie geek at the Mac store who looks at you like this condescending, well, you just need to know your address. And address is, like, something with an @ symbol. And I'm like, pipe it, Poindexter. And then the Bluetooth isn't syncing to your mouse and to your keyboard and this, and they want you to update and ask you for permissions for things you don't even know what they are, and if somebody's going to come in from space and find out what you ate for dinner. Am I right or am I right? So, here we are. Okay, so we're doing property ownership. Everybody say, woo! So I'm going to do a little rambling before we get into any questions. So first, who could tell me the difference between real and personal property? Real and personal property. Real and personal property. Okay, so real is immovable and personal is movable, right? Is that like the all-encompassing definition, the end-all definition? I love that, Andrew. Personal property goes with the personal. Real properties goes with the real estate. Personal property goes with the person. Real property goes with the real estate. What does that mean? So when you sell a house, everything that goes with you is personal property. And that's a better example than personal property is movable and real property is immovable. Why? Because there's examples of things that's personal property. It's kind of hard to move. And examples of things that are real property that you can literally pick up and throw in the air. Who could give me an example of that? Who could give me an example of that? So a hot tub would be real property and it's immovable. Who could give me an example that is something that is real property but very easy to move? What do you guys think? What about keys? Is keys real property or personal property? When you guys sell a house, do you walk away with the keys? Well, maybe you do, but you shouldn't. When you guys sell a house, what happens to the keys? They go with the property. So they're actually real property, right? Calvin, exactly, Taurine. You give them to the buyer because you wouldn't take them with you, but aren't they movable? You could pick up and throw them. Who can give me another example of that? Something you could pick up and move fairly easily, but it actually goes with the property. What do you guys think? Who could give me another example of something you could pick up and move fairly easy, but it actually goes with the property? Jessica says crops. Well, that depends, landlord-tenant relationship or buyer-seller. Mindy says blinds. Great one, Mindy. Also, a pool covering would be an example. A pool covering would be something you wouldn't take with you, right? But pool coverings are meant to be, picked up and moved as per the season. Correct, guys? So pool covering would be an example of something that is real property, easily to move. Now let's go the other way around. What is something that is personal property but super hard to move? So what is something that is personal property but would be super difficult to move? What do you guys think? What is something that would be personal property? So ceiling fan would technically be real property. Okay. So what about a dentist chair? What about a dentist chair? What do you guys think? Is that easy or hard to move? A dentist chair. You guys have been to the dentist recently? Those chairs are literally bolted into the ground. They're bolted into the ground. Super hard to move. According to the Maria test, method of attachment would be real property, but it's not, right? Why is it not real property? Why is a dentist chair actually personal property even though it's literally bolted to the ground? What do you guys think? You could say the same for a pizza oven, like a pizza restaurant oven. I kind of just gave it away there. Because it's there for a trade or business. It's there for a trade or business. Okay? So a dentist chair is meant for a business, so it's personal property. And Vanessa just said that. It's a trade fixture. It's a trade fixture. So we need to back up. What is a fixture? And I hope you guys don't mind me doing this instead of the questions. I just feel like this is really important to get the overall gist of everything and put it into context before you just randomly belt out questions. So what is a fixture? What is a fixture? Anybody know? That's right, Vanessa. Fixture is real property. So what is a fixture? Anybody? So a fixture is something that was personal, but now is real as it is incorporated into the land. Incorporated into the land. Everybody write that in the chat. Incorporated into the land. Can you guys please write that? Incorporated into the land. Incorporated into the land. Okay, that's what a fixture is. Now there's an acronym for fixture, which I actually mentioned a few minutes ago. What is the acronym to test if something is a fixture? What is the acronym to test if something is a fixture? Maria. Maria, good. So Maria is the acronym to test something as a fixture. What does Maria stand for? What does Maria stand for? Who knows? What do I mean by incorporated into the land? Meaning it's part of the property now. It's physically part of the property. It goes with the property. Okay, so M is method. So that's one way of being incorporated into land to answer Rose's question. The method we mentioned could be bolted to the wall or bolted to the ceiling like a fan. A, what about A? M, A. A is adaptability. So method, adaptability. R is relationship. I is intention, and A is agreement. Everybody write that down. Everybody write that in chat. So Rose said, what do you mean by incorporated in the land? I mean, is it part of the property? And so the way you know if it's part of the property is method, adaptability, relationship, intention, and agreement. Why is this important? So a lot of people say, would you actually study for the exam? It doesn't really apply to what we're actually going to do. And if anybody says that, so look at those people and be like, I hate you. How many people have heard that? People say, oh, what you study for the exam doesn't apply to what you really are going to do. Ugh, I hate those people. Why do I hate those people? Because they do nothing to motivate you to pass. And you guys got to pass. I mean, who listens to that? It's like, oh, I'm so motivated to study now. God. So the reason I bring that up, because this is very relevant to what you're actually going to do. When you guys sell a property, on the second page of the purchase contract, maybe your contracts are a little different, but it's there somewhere regardless. It says what goes with the land and what doesn't. And what they're talking about is that last A in Maria, agreement. So somebody says the chandelier goes with, no it doesn't, yes it does, okay, write it down. And if you're a good real estate agent, you try and write down all the things that you could think is a potential point of conflict. Maybe you even have to add an addendum if there's so many. Because if it's not written down and there's a fight and it goes to court, they will look at the method, the adaptability, the relationship, and the intention. But hopefully you guys just have to rely on that last one, A, for agreement. And that's what I mean. This is massively relevant because when somebody says, well, the chandelier goes with this, well, it doesn't. Well, the shoes in the hall go with it and this doesn't. They will refer to this. And this argument obviously happens all the time. Maybe it's happened in your own life already, in your personal life of just buying and selling a home for yourself. What goes with, what doesn't. Now, obviously, this isn't a legal course, and this gets much more complicated and much more detailed, of which a lawyer would help with. But you guys get the gist of it. This is the starting point when they start to see what goes with and what doesn't. And to avoid those conflicts, you usually use the agreement, which is usually on the first few pages of the purchase contract. All right, everybody got it? Right? Got it, Joe? Okay, and that's why this is so relevant. Okay, so you have that fixtures incorporated into the land. And so fixtures are real property unless what we mentioned before? Unless what? Unless what? We mentioned it before. The fixtures are real property unless it is for what do you guys think? What do you guys think? What do you guys think? A trade or business. Good job. All right. Torian, I apologize if I mispronounce your name, but I want to give you credit where credit's due. You got that right. So trade fixture. Okay, it's for a trade or business. Does everybody understand this? If you understand it, I'm going to give you a tough question. I'm going to give you 2 tough questions about this. Because everybody thinks this is so simple. They're like, oh, I get it. Real, immovable, personal, movable. It's totally easy. So you guys ever see questions when you practice exams? You're like, this concept's so easy. Why do I not know the answer to this question? All right. Or there's two options. You're like, which one? I understood. Immovable, movable. Okay. So, here's the question. Is a lease personal or real property? So we're not even talking about a physical thing. It's not a physical thing. It's an agreement, right? A lease is an agreement. You know, that you usually send electronically. I mean, this isn't like 1982 where everybody has to sign a paper anymore. You know, got all DocuSign and stuff like that. It's personal. Why is it personal? And please don't tell me because it's a piece of paper. I want you guys to give me a more intelligent answer than that so we understand the concept. We love these memory techniques like little acronyms and memory things, but honestly, guys, you'll be better if you understand the concept, which is why we're talking today. Because the problem with these memory techniques, and I use them and I love them, but if the question you see doesn't align with that little tricky little fun technique, you're in trouble. But if you understand the concept, the question doesn't have to look exactly like what you studied. Does everybody get that? Does everybody understand? So in these days with ChatGPT and Google Gemini and all the resources you got, there's no reason not to understand the concept, all right? Does everybody got it? Please try and understand the gist of it if you can, because if you don't, the question doesn't line up with those little fun little acronyms, you could be in trouble. So, back to my thing, the lease is personal. Why? Why is the lease personal? Jessica says it's personal because it goes with a person. All right, so Jessica, what do you mean by that? What do we mean by it goes with a person? The lease goes with a person. Okay, Vanessa said for your own personal agreement. Good. So let's put it in real terms here. Has anybody ever rented a property before? Like you owned a house, or maybe you were a tenant, like you were either the lessor or the lessee? Raise your hand if you guys have done that. If you've been involved in a lease, either as the tenant or the landlord. Or are we all property owners? Or are we all just living with our parents forever? When you guys have that contract, does the contract begin and end with the transfer of the property? In other words, when the property is bought, does the contract start? And when the property is sold, does that lease contract end? Does the contract start when the property is bought, and does the contract end when the property is sold? What do you guys think? Or can the contract start after the sale of the property and end before, or even continue on after the transfer? There you go, Vanessa. No, it doesn't. The contract has nothing to do with the transfer. I mean, it does indirectly. I mean, you get my point. But we could buy a property, sit in it for 3 months, rent it later, and then end that lease long before I sell it. So therefore, remember when we started this, we said real property goes with the real estate. And this agreement is not coming and going with the real estate. Does everybody got that? Because if it was real property, it would transfer with the beginning and end of the sale of the property. And this is what I mean by, you guys don't need to remember, well, a piece of paper is personal. This concept isn't that hard. Once you think of it like that, you're like, oh, this is so basic, right? I don't need these silly memory techniques to understand that now. Am I right or am I right? And now you have a better chance of getting it right on the exam, as opposed to looking for a piece of paper. Okay, so that was a tricky question. I'm going to one-up you and give you an even harder one on this concept. Are you guys ready? Everybody right? Ready? Once again, I hope me explaining this stuff is helpful. I just think this is like the foundation of a lot of what you guys need to know. Okay, what about corn? So crops. So corn is growing on the land. Is that personal or real? This is a real tough one. Corn. So corn, tomatoes, whatever crop you could think of. Everybody ready for the answer? So nobody's gotten it right yet. Give you guys another 10 seconds, see if anybody can get it right. The answer is, it depends. Ooh, it's a tough one. It depends if it's landlord-tenant relationship or buyer-seller relationship. So emblements, we're talking about emblements, that's what we're talking about. When they're grown on the property and it's a landlord-tenant, it's personal. But if it's sold as part of the land, it could be real. So my point is, when you see your exam and the questions, if you guys, there you go, Trix says before harvest real property. Thank you, Trix, great job. And because of what Trix hers said and what I'm talking about, when you see emblements, pretty please read the question. Read the question. Everybody got that? Right, Trix? So you guys got to look for what they're saying and what they're talking about. Thank you, Trix, for that clarification. Yvette says, hi, sorry I'm late. Oh, Yvette, you missed it. First 5 minutes of this, I was like, number 1's going to B, 2 is C, 3 is D. Don't tell anybody. Write down these answers. Screw this learning. Just write it down. You'll be fine. No, I didn't do that. Okay, so my point is with emblements, read the question carefully. All right. So we have the personal and real property. Now there's different types of ownership. You know, you get into freehold and less than freehold and all that kind of stuff, all right? But when you own the property, are you limited at all? So when you own the property, are you limited at all? Or do you have absolute ownership? You hear that word, fee simple absolute. Does that mean you have absolute ownership? Do you have absolute ownership? So we're talking about property ownership today. When you have a fee simple absolute estate, do you have absolute ownership? What do you guys think? Do you have absolute ownership when you have a fee simple absolute estate? Andrew said, what is an emblement? Can anybody define an emblement for Andrew in the chat? And also answer my question. If you have fee simple absolute estate, do you have absolute ownership? No. You have the highest interest, but you don't have the absolute ownership. There are limitations. What are those limitations? What are those limitations? So Samar says, no, there's a limitation, and he's correct. What is the limitation? So what is the limitation? So the limitations, I'll give you a hint. Here's an example of the limitations. Police power, eminent domain, taxation, escheat. What am I talking about here? What are those limitations I'm referring to? Pete. Pete. What is Pete? Pete's an acronym for what? Pete's an acronym for what? Thank you, Trix. Emblements are cultivated crops. Trix has been studying. If you're next to her, look at her paper. No, don't do that. Unless you want to make a quick buck, Trix. So Pete are the government powers. The government powers. Okay? The most common one you guys hear about limits your property is taxation. Am I right? That's the one that's common. We all understand taxation. Property gets taxed. Okay. Ready for a trick question? Who's ready for a trick question? Right, ready, Joe. Are taxes a specific lien or a general lien? Are taxes a specific lien or a general lien? Are taxes a specific lien or a general lien? I gave you a hint. I said I'm being tricky here. This is a trick question, so I'm trying to trick you. Meryl says it depends. Oh, excuse me. Marili says it depends. What do you mean by that? Because you're spot on. You caught on to my trickiness. It depends. So, income tax is a general lien. Property tax is a specific lien. You guys are saying specifics, we're talking about property, but if you don't pay your property taxes, do they take everything you own? No, they'll take the property. Income tax, if you don't pay, they're coming after everything. That's the difference between a general lien and a specific lien. Everybody got that? And that's part of those government powers. Police power, eminent domain, taxation, and escheat. So a property tax is a specific lien. What's the difference between police power and eminent domain? Police power and eminent domain. What do you guys think? Police power and eminent domain. What's the difference between police power and eminent domain? Everybody ready? One word that'll help you. Money. Money, 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 money. Money, 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 money. In eminent domain, they take your property through a process called condemnation, and just compensation must be paid. If they expand a highway and the highway goes over your property and they need to take your property, they will give you money for that. Now, obviously, it's that simple. I wish, and you wish, but obviously, there's a lot more details with that, which we don't need to get into. But the idea is, if the government needs to take your property for the greater good, then money will be paid in that process called condemnation. Police power, they're not giving you any money. Examples of police power would be rent control, building codes, zoning. So if there's a building code they got to put on your property, they're not giving you money for that, or a building code you need to abide by. Everybody got that? So the big difference to help you remember is eminent domain, money would be paid. Everybody got that? All right, got it, Joe. So in eminent domain, money would be paid. In police power, they're just telling you how to use it. And like I said, examples of police power are building codes, zoning, rent control. I can't think of any others right now. If you guys could think of some, great. But those are the ones that come up top of my head. In eminent domain, if they ruin your property and they do not pay you, what can you do? What can you do? What action can you take? You could file for inverse condemnation. Exactly, Mindy. Mindy wrote, police power doesn't take over your property, just implements restrictions and regulations. Correct. Exactly, Mindy Little. And that's what I mean, Mindy. They don't give you money. They're not taking your property, but they will kind of put restrictions on it, to use your words. So well done, Mindy. Whereas eminent domain, they're taking your property because whoop. Excuse me, they're paying money because whoop. So inverse condemnation is the lawsuit when the government takes your property in eminent domain and doesn't give you fair market value or just compensation or anything at all. So it's a lawsuit against the government. I've never done this. I can't imagine it's easy. But there you go. So those government powers limit your ability to enjoy the property. So you don't have absolute power over the property. And that fee simple absolute may be the maximum, but it's not all encompassing. Everybody got that? Good. All right, guys, I hope you guys mind. I didn't go over a lot of questions today. That I did this explanation. I hope that helped you. With the property ownership section. So guys, remember to learn 5 words every morning. Memorize 5. Doesn't matter which words. At night, set aside 5 words. In the morning, memorize them. Remember, this is basically a glorified vocabulary exam. Not totally, obviously, but that's a huge part of it. And the day gets away from you, so make sure when you wake up, memorize your 5 words, and you'll find being consistent will go a long, long way, rather than just waiting to reserve like 10 hours on a day and cramming it. Just 5 words every morning. Is that all you should do? No. But it's a good way to make sure you're consistent on those days where things slip away from you. All right, guys. Thank you. Have a wonderful day.